It's really a pleasure to be here. It's been a great day to to hear so many different perspectives on this ever-changing, ever-exciting field. Thank you also to Startup America Partnership, who introduced me to Michael and today, so that's great, and we've got a wonderful relationship with them. So yes, my name is Ben Stone. I'm the Director of Small Business and Startup Development at American Express, and I have a kind of bizarre trajectory to this point right now at the podium, and I think it's probably worth getting into it a little bit because I think it's relevant to what I'm doing now in this conversation. First of all, I'm not Generation Y technically. I think I'm 2 years older than that, but close enough, I suppose. I'm not. I don't know where I am actually. I don't. Maybe. I think. I like to think of myself actually, and it's probably relevant as bridging a couple different generations and bridging the entrepreneurship and corporate world. So let me introduce Indigo Africa first. So Indigo Africa is a 501c3, a nonprofit social enterprise that does two very different but very related things. The first is partnering with now more than 500 women artists and entrepreneurs in Rwanda who are all set up as their own for-profit businesses. So they're running their own independent businesses. And what we do is partner with them to first design, produce, export, market, sell a wide variety of accessories, home decor, on our online store, and then also to major brands, so J. Crew, Nicole Miller, Anthropologie, in some really innovative co-design projects. That's the first side of the business. That's the market access side. The second side is pooling all of our, using our revenue from those products and using them to cover all of our costs of goods sold. So paying fair trade wages to the women, shipping, raw materials, distribution, an allocation of employee salaries, and anything that's left over, pool that with donations. That money is then used to fund training programs that we developed from the ground up in business management, entrepreneurship, literacy, and computers that are taught to all of those same women. And one of my favorite things about it that's also quite relevant to what we were talking about today is those classes are taught by now, I think, 18 of the top university students in Rwanda. And so they go through a huge vetting and application process. And so the top business school students go and teach the business classes. The top education students go teach the literacy classes. And this is in a partnership with another NGO called Generation Rwanda that provides scholarships for the more socially vulnerable, lots of times orphans, to go to university. So just one of my favorite things. So the real idea behind that was to kind of disrupt the conversation about what companies like this could be doing and how people could be interacting with entrepreneurs in different parts of the world. And so what we're trying to do is provide not only access to markets, but following up and layering on education, so these women can have the skills, information, and confidence to be engaging the global markets and the global communities on their own terms without Indigo Africa's intervention. And over the last 5 years, we've seen that come to fruition much faster than I ever could have possibly imagined. There are women who are started from absolutely the most incredibly terrible situations that I could imagine, and couldn't even look me in the eye when I first met them. And now they are confident, hardcore negotiators, and have traveled to the U.S. and given speeches all over the country and provided real inspiration both in their countries and in ours. So that's Indigo Africa. Now, how is that relevant to me? So I actually graduated college and then went to law school and then became a very boring corporate lawyer. And so for 4 years, although I absolutely loved it, I was a corporate defense lawyer representing accounting firms, energy companies, lots of other government investigations, lots of stuff like that. And then what happened was a good friend of mine from college who also went to law school and became a boring, pretty dorky corporate lawyer. I guess the dorky is not relevant to the lawyer thing. It's just us, and also very fashion challenged, which is another thing that people always ask me is like, how are these two dorky white lawyers running a fashion company? And so a lot of it is the idea of entrepreneurship and really not necessarily knowing where you're going sometimes, but you have an idea and then you let it unfold in a very effectual way. So this guy, my buddy Matt, grew up off and on in Africa and had always seen the entrepreneurial spirit of African women artisans, but the fact that they were held back by lack of access to markets and education. So it was something that always stewed in his brain. And I'd actually never been to Africa until we started this. And so at the end of 2006, he quit his job, and then I brought Indigo Africa in as my pro bono client at my law firm called Orrick, Harrington and Sutcliffe, which is just a big corporate law firm. And I just got addicted, and I got the firm really involved. I made sure that there were projects for different offices around the world to work on, and just got addicted. And then in the summer of 2008, I went with Matt to Rwanda, the first time for me, to set up the training program portion of the business, and just had one of those moments in time where I met these women and I saw how incredible they were and the potential that they had. And then also the unique potential of this business model, which I think was combining things in a very original and powerful way. So I went back to my law firm that summer and I said, listen, I've decided to take a 6-month leave of absence. I'm not going to get paid from either entity, obviously. I'm planning to bankrupt myself. A, will you let me come back if that's what I decide I want to do? And B, is there anything that you might do to help me out? Because I'm really screwing myself over here. And amazingly, they came back and they said, listen, we give out charitable contributions a lot, but this is a very unique opportunity to make what we think amounts to a venture capital investment in you and this very interesting idea, which at that point was nothing. So they said, why don't you do this full time for a year, and we'll continue to pay you a very small portion of your salary. So you can pursue this and you're not ruining your life at the same time. And I said, that's awesome. I will take you up on that offer. And to make a longer story short, over the last 4 years, Indigo Africa just snowballed. And at the same time, Orrick's participation in Indigo Africa snowballed as well. So it started out with I'd say an investment more in me than the organization, and then evolved to me being totally irrelevant, which was the ultimate success. All the way to so I actually just started American Express 2 months ago. And up until that point, Orrick was still paying me a small portion of my salary not to work for them, and instead to be running this company. And about 3 years ago, I moved Indigo Africa's operations out of my apartment and into Orrick's beautiful Midtown offices. And then a couple months later, told them that I happened to be running a business out of their offices. And like everything else, they said, "That's awesome. How can we help?" So that's just one really interesting example of a corporation engaging with a nonprofit or an entrepreneur in a very novel way and using the resources available. Sometimes it's not about money; it's using other things that are available to you. So Matt and I, we always knew that this was something that we were not going to be able to do for a long period of time. We made it sustainable. It's a sustainable business. It's profitable. And it's not going anywhere. And that was always the goal, was to build a strong business infrastructure, robust financial controls, institutionalizing decision-making, policies, procedure, and most importantly, creating a culture that was not going to be reliant on the dorky founders. It was going to be reliant on something else, something bigger, so we could extricate ourselves. So Matt actually left 2 years ago to go to Google, and he's now the University Program Manager for Africa, Middle East, Europe. So he's the main liaison between all of those amazing entrepreneurs in those different countries and academics and Google. So it's a pretty sweet job. And then I took over fully as CEO for the last 2 years and tried to get Indigo into the next step. But the last year I was really thinking about, all right, well, what am I going to do next now that I've put some leaders in place who I really trust? So the one thing that always got me up in the morning about Indigo was not necessarily helping these women, although that was it's a great thing, but it was just I loved the rigmarole of starting a business and running a business, and all the headaches and that go along with that, because I think people glamorize entrepreneurship a lot, where you see pictures of people standing with their arms folded in front of like their building. And I can tell you, I think the more apt picture is someone with their head in their hands, like at like 3 a.m, getting weird phone calls and really worrying a lot. And so that's why I think community of entrepreneurs is so important, is to be able to talk with people and have people understand that it's a very heavy burden a lot of time, particularly when you're doing something like this, where, it's not just 400 women, it's each one has 5.5 dependents that they're taking care of and are really disrupting their community, sometimes in a good way and sometimes in a way that you have to be very careful about. So it's a lot. So what really got me was the business model of Indigo really was combining this idea of market-driven, the power of market-driven approaches and the power of philanthropic, more traditional approaches. And so what I really wanted to do was pursue that, the idea that social impact can drive business, but more importantly, that business can drive social impact, but that social impact can drive business. And I think that's a component that a lot of people lose sight of sometimes, is that those things it's a wonderful circle. But the best situation is when you're not even thinking about one driving the other, they're just the same. And so that's the kind of company I was looking at, which is that their business model was inherently driving social impact. So I think Google, for instance, is a great example of that. They have 30,000 employees, the same as like a company like Caterpillar. But the amount of social impact that they're having systemically across the world is 1,000 times that, because they're creating the platforms, the goods and the services that people are using to transform so many other businesses and so many other lives. So that's what I was looking at. And so I heard, I was doing the typical coffee chats and really thinking about what I want to do. And I met a friend who was at American Express Open. And she started telling me about what American Express Open did. My first instinct, well, this is a 150-year-old company. I don't know if I'm going to be the right person to walk in there. But the more I heard about what Open did, the more I felt like it fit that model of driving social impact, whether it really wanted to or not. But I thought what really kind of gave me a light bulb was when I heard the mission statement, which is not, it was almost like a nonprofit mission statement, which is to help small businesses do more business, period. And I thought that was kind of really interesting. And then I started to learn some more about it, and I went on, and so I looked at this website called Open Forum. I don't know if someone could pull it up. It's not that it's. But that's an amazing resource for entrepreneurs to find. There's blog posts. There are toolkits for entrepreneurs. There's lots of different things, and it's a community as well, so you can really connect with people. And then I also. I also started thinking about or hearing about other things like Small Business Saturday. So that's something that American Express Open, which by the way is the business unit of American Express that creates goods, services, and products for small businesses, just for the record. Small Business Saturday is something that came out of this idea that 90% of Americans, or probably more, I would imagine, are committed to helping their communities by buying local. And that's something that's just kind of obvious, but I don't think anyone had really owned in a really powerful way yet. So a couple of years ago, American Express Open launched Small Business Saturday, and that was about awareness about shopping local. It was about deals. It was about and bringing in, I think, 30 different corporate partners. So it wasn't necessarily like this is just ours. It was opening up that ecosystem to other corporations to take advantage of it. And it's been incredibly successful to the point where it's moved into all of American Express. And I think it's one of the driving kind of brand themes of American Express these days. And I think everyone's very proud of the economic development that it's driven. And then there are other things about American Express Open that I think just the products themselves I find very compelling. So there's the Plum Card, which is something that came out fairly recently and really helps small business owners and entrepreneurships deal with the cash flow challenges. And I can tell you from personal experiences, cash flow, particularly when you're in a raw materials manufacturing business, is just absolutely crucial. I mean, for instance, at Indigo Africa, there were situations where we got an incredibly huge purchase order from a large retailer, but we had to buy $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 worth of raw material 8 months before we were actually going to get paid on that purchase order. So for a very small organization, that's a really big deal. And finding the tools and the services and the assistance to get over those kinds of hurdles, that's what makes businesses succeed, and that's what makes businesses grow. Because if they can't do those things, then they are going to fail. So suddenly there was this really amazing position at American Express that opened up. to run what they call their advocacy programs. And so that was another component that sealed the deal for me. So what the advocacy programs are at American Express Open are really what I think of as like the boots on the ground representation of the corporation. And so it's really focused on two different areas and moving into a third. And the first is women. And so the idea of working with women-owned businesses started back almost 10 years ago. And that was initiated by the president of Open, Susan Sabet, who really has an incredible passion and for helping women-owned businesses. So it started out with real traditional sponsorship, like charitable sponsorships to different women's organizations. But then it really evolved, I think in a great way, to doing more co-collaboration platforms with different nonprofits. So it moved from just here's money, just do what you do, to let's do something together. Let's bring our resources together. And so there was a really great program over the last 5 years that focused on getting a lot of women in the room and doing practices on pitching and mentoring, and there were financing opportunities and lots of other stuff like that. And that was incredibly successful. And from the women's programs came the idea of government contracting. And this is, I think, an amazing area that Open is in, which is that there are annually $525 billion roughly that the government spends on different products and services. It's the biggest customer in the United States. And it mandated by law that 23% of those contracts have to go to small businesses. So it's an incredible opportunity both to grow the Open business and to help small businesses by helping them build those bridges between the government and small businesses. So it started with a program called Give Me Five, because out of those 3%, 5% have to go to women-owned businesses, and the same problems are there. The challenges of getting the people in the room, and also getting the small business owners to really understand the incredible amount of logistics and hard work and oftentimes upfront money that has to go into landing these contracts. But if you land these contracts, it's transformational for a business. It's not a $100,000 contract. It's a $20 million contract often. So there's a lot of interesting things that go in with that. And that kind of led into what's now called the Victory in Procurement program, which is American Express Open's government contracting program. And it's evolved to tons of different events that are connecting people, webinars, and lots of other innovative things that we're thinking about doing, connecting those. And then finally, and I think this was on Open's mind for a while, and I think me coming in maybe helped spur them a little bit more, which is the idea of really engaging more with young entrepreneurs. And just because, as we all know, there's just a huge opportunity there to help drive the success of the United States and globally by investing in the future. And it's really about powering not just today, but powering tomorrow, I believe, by making those investments. And so finally, I think one of the really things that I'm thinking about now as I've taken hold of these programs is how do we move forward? How do we engage these partners? How do we do things like that? And so I have a couple principles that I'm kind of laying out as I'm literally in my second month there. So one of them is that everything that we do, everything that Open does with these programs, and hopefully overall, is first identifying a barrier for entrepreneurs and small business owners. And so I think it sounds obvious, but I think it's really important because oftentimes no one in this room is doing it by any means, but there's been a proliferation of cause marketing over the past probably 10 years. And I think a lot of it has been pretty empty. I think that customers and consumers are moving away from that now and are asking tougher questions, rightfully so, as we should all be encouraging them to. So the first thing is is there a problem that we should even be solving here? And so that's number one. And then the second is, okay, so now there's the problem. What can we do that's going to solve that problem, that's going to help these companies have breakout moments and overcome these barriers, that's unique, that's effective, that's efficient, that's scalable, and that's disruptive, and that's proprietary in a lot of ways. So those are kind of some of the things that I'm thinking about as we develop these new programs. And then the theme also, I think, is about not just one-off partnerships, not just like a transient collaborations. What we want to look at is long-term partnerships, long-term infrastructure. So a lot of the time, I see a challenge in that sometimes because a lot of companies want those short-term wins. They want that short-term PR hit. But I think that there needs to be a careful balance between looking at those kind of wins and looking at those long-term wins where you put in place a platform and a program that's really going to build on itself year on year and not just be a one-off thing. And then finally, really boots on the ground. I just think that's such an incredibly important thing. And I know that there's a trend really to bring everything digital and scalable. And I think that we should continue to push that. But you simply cannot replace face-to-face interactions. And that will never happen. And so I think that there is a really important component to that I want to continue stressing, because I think that's where you're able to have breakthrough moments, both in terms of brand relevance, when you know that this person from this company is here in front of you taking the time to talk to you. That is huge. That's transformational. And so it may not be scalable, but it's scalable in that those people are then becoming influencers themselves and really talking about that stuff. So it's scalable in maybe a little bit counterintuitive ways. And then finally, how do you measure the success of programs like this? And, I think this was talked about before, but programs like that I'm now running here at Open are pretty unique, I think, that they're not corporate philanthropy, they're not corporate social responsibility, they're not the purely profit-driven, there's something in between, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what to call them. But how do you measure that stuff? You can measure it how you traditionally measure business, which is the PR or the acquisition for a credit card, and other stuff like that. And I think those things are incredibly important. But I think, and I don't remember who said this before, but I think the most important thing is, what's the impact? What's the impact on these businesses? And let's focus on measuring that, because that is directly tied to the business objectives of Open anyway. And that's the beautiful thing about this circle, is that the more businesses we help, the more people are going to become successful business owners. And if they still like us and they have a real tie to our brand and loyalty to our brand, like Michael, for instance, they're going to sign up for the cards. And so it's just a great brand strategy and business strategy. And that's why I'm so excited to be working here, is because it's exactly what I wanted, which was a really interesting, innovative business where the social impact is baked right in. So that's my thing about Open. And the last thing I'll say is just I've through Indigo Africa, I've done a lot of speaking to young entrepreneurs and students over the last 4 to 5 years. And there's one thing that I always say, which is that you can be so aspirational about what you want to do. You want to be an entrepreneur. You want to change the world. But in order to do all those things, you also have to just simply get nerdy. And what that means is you cannot build a business unless you know how to the basic accounting skills, or what cash flow means, or what it means to hire someone as an employee versus a contractor. Those are the things that help you go from an idea in a garage to a business that actually is going to work in the long term. And so what I say often, and I'm saying again now, is that for these young people, go for it, but do it in a very deliberate way, or else it's not going to be successful. It could possibly be the best idea in the world, but unless you put in that dorky, nerdy, digging in on the ground and staying up all night reading textbooks, you are not going to be able to take it to the next level. And it will be a shame, because you'll have missed an opportunity. The last thing I will say is that I love this conversation about entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. I feel like I was somewhat entrepreneurial within my law firm, finding those resources and asking for them, and then working it into their business model in some ways. And I think that's a really healthy thing. I think that entrepreneurs should not necessarily limit themselves to just being entrepreneurs. They should take those skills and bring them into corporations and be disruptive and help those corporations, like 150-year-old corporations, think about things differently. That to me is huge value. That's my opinion, at least. We'll see. But and then vice versa, which is that there's a huge value that people who have been working at corporations can bring by leaving and being entrepreneurs. There are skills, there are experiences that they bring to the table that someone who's just starting fresh is not going to have. And again, what the objective is not starting companies. Anyone can start a company. It's about building sustainable, profitable, impactful companies that are going to be around for a long time, because that's the hard thing to do. And that, quite frankly, is my proudest moment, is not starting Indigo Africa. It's getting it to a point where I could leave and feel totally comfortable that it was going to be around for decades.